Hi, welcome to Alt Script. I'm JK.
My name is Riya, and we're a podcast of two second-gen Korean creatives who left our dream jobs to live life on our own terms.
All right, this is episode 3.
Yay!
We're going to be talking a little bit more about how we left our authentic selves in this episode, and hopefully we're going to dive a little bit more into our childhoods and what our aspirations were sort of before we got into our careers, and hopefully that provides a little bit more context to why we even got into the jobs that we did in the first place. Yeah.
Excited. Getting into the formative years, I guess.
Yeah. And, talking about our childhoods. Haven't done that in a while. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I don't, it's not every day that you talk about, things that happened as a child.
That's fair. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I don't know. Unless you're in therapy.
Yeah, unless you're in therapy or all your friends are in therapy. Yeah.
Yeah. Childhood traumas, that's topical. People like to talk about that.
Yeah. But we won't talk about that today. We'll talk about more about our childhood dreams.
Yeah, they might all be connected somehow.
Fair.
Yeah. But do you want to start us off? Do you want to share a little bit about how you ended up, in a career in the creative world? Because obviously, you went to art school, so you knew.
I did go to art school, but if we were to kind of take a step back into childhood years, I was always like very creatively inclined. I was really good at copying pictures, like in drawings and paintings. Like, I guess, yeah.
I wasn't.
I got it from my dad.
Okay,
he's an artist.
Cool.
And so I guess I just picked it up really easily, being able to doing observational drawings really well. So yeah, as a kid, I think it was just natural that title, that label of oh, you're very artistic or creative was immediately attached to me. So I never really fought it. I really enjoyed it. I kind of joke around with my niece and nephew that I made my Barbie's clothes out of napkins, because we're poor. But at the same time, I really liked it because it's such a easy, material to work with to make clothes. And I was that type of kid. I'd make my own toys. I'd build my own toys all the time. So I was always that type of kid. But actually, when I would say at school what I wanted to be when I grew up, it was always artist and a pastor.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was always the two. Yeah, and my dad is a pastor, so I got that from him too. I just liked the fact that he was able to help people about life questions and stuff. And I thought from a very young age that was that's so cool. So there's both of those leanings that I had as a child.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because you mentioned that, I was just reminded of the fact that, when I was growing up as well as a kid, I remember, because I also grew up in the church, my parents asking me what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I think at that time I was I want to, help people and save people like Jesus did. and then I think that's when my dad planted the seed of then you should become a doctor.
He found the opportunity.
Yeah,
that
was sneaky. I think I remember as a kid, my parents, they had a very good start as immigrants. They had more opportunities than the typical immigrant, I guess. And so, I remember Dad drove a nice car, and, once we were driving in his car and I looked outside the window and I saw this really beat up car. I said, I don't want to drive that when I'm older. And then Dad, I remember he chimed in and said, you won't have to if you become a doctor.
Any chance he got.
Any chance he got. Yeah. But obviously it stuck with me because I still remember those moments. I was only like 5, 6, 7 at the time, but I remember those specific moments. And I think that's why all through school, I studied, chemistry, physics, maths. I was definitely preparing myself for pre-med, at the,
Okay.
yeah.
So
And,
you really got influenced.
Yeah, I actually applied to dental schools and medical schools and all of that, and I actually enrolled to go to dental school.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, when I graduated high school. Yeah, and it was only by chance that I applied for law school with science as a dual degree.
Okay.
Because in Australia you can do law undergrad, and I thought, you know what, I'll just apply for this. If I get it, I'll consider it, then. But I did it lightheartedly. I didn't actually think that I was going to get in.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Wait, and so at that point you're bought into potentially being a doctor. Like you wanted that.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, well, I mean, I thought that it was a good job to have, and I didn't really think much, sort of beyond that.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
When you're that young, you don't really. I guess your brain's definitely not developed enough to think about like the deeper things and the further things too.
Right.
So
Right.
that makes sense.
Yeah. And I think that I always thought to myself, I could always do something else after.
Yeah. Yeah. Options.
I had options.
Oh, I didn't know that. I had no idea. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's very typical, right? Like in Asian immigrant families, like you become a doctor or a lawyer or an accountant. I don't know, just like something very useful and high paying, right?
Yeah, like a specialized job.
Yeah.
And I think, and I'm sure this resonates with a lot of immigrant kids out there. But, I think when you have your parents move to another country where they're not comfortable with the language and they're having to work in, I guess, jobs or areas that they, weren't skilled or trained in back home, they want their kids to have jobs or take on careers where they're going to be sort of accepted and revered and, I guess, acknowledged in society. And
totally.
Like where they have a bit more sort of, stability, leverage, the status. I get it. I think I can appreciate that as an older, immigrant kid now.
Yeah.
But I do think that, there is also something to be said for, the sort of environment in which you were raised as well, having a big impact on how, you start dreaming and, I guess, sort of the direction you take in pursuing your dreams. Do you think that your parents or your environment had a big influence on, you pursuing your creative career?
Not necessarily. Like what you said, right? Like when you're a part of that Korean immigrant family, and I wouldn't just, say only Korean either. It's like any immigrant family, there is going to be that drive to succeed, especially here in America, right? It's like, it's a place to make your dreams come true. There's no limits as long as you apply yourself. And so the community that I grew up in, I would say was like maybe like 80% Korean immigrant families. And so I was always surrounded by that same type of mentality.
Wow.
Right? Like all those parents like impose it on their kids of like, you guys need to like succeed and, do X, Y, and Z. A little bit different for me in the sense where like my dad, yes, he immigrated here, but he immigrated here very young. He immigrated when he was 17. So I would say he was a bit more Americanized than your average typical, immigrant dad. So he like my parents directly never really were heavy handed in wanting me to pursue like medical, like the medical way or even a legal like law or whatever. But my dad did drop here and there because I had eczema growing up, like really severely. And then he'd be like, "Oh, now you can empathize with other people that have severe skin skin whatever diseases. You should be a dermatologist." He would drop it here and there, but he was never like pushy about it. I just be like, "No, I'm suffering because of it. Why would I want to study it?" But no one around me was an artist. Like my dad was an artist as a hobby, right? Like, and he was amazing at it, but it wasn't his job. And no one else around me that I knew in that Korean community pursued that either. So I never felt like maybe that was an option until until I started applying for colleges. So like a little step back here too, like because the community I grew up in was very like pushed academics really hard and my parents didn't, I took it upon myself to search for a school, like a junior high school that was more academic. So my parents had no idea that the high school I went to, Oxford Academy, was like even a thing. Like I searched it out on my own because all my peers were talking about how their parents are forcing them to apply. And I was like, oh, if everyone's applying, then I probably should apply. So like I walked to that school by myself after school one day, and I like picked up the application and I filled it out and I just told my parents sign here and here, and they had no idea what it was, and I got my own transcripts and like
wow.
yeah, in 7th grade, and I submitted it. And so like I kind of like pursued that on my own because all my peers were doing it. So I kind of like, I pushed myself to be more academic because I knew like I was probably a little bit above average too when it came to academics too. And so I was like, oh yeah, like I can do this. All my friends are doing it. So why not pursue more of an academic route? Until I applied to colleges and I got rejected from everywhere. So it was like really like an anomaly because because the high school I went to, it's like guaranteed you get into at least a Cal State, right? But everyone there, because the kids are so smart, most of them go to like a really good UC or private Ivy League, And then they're like, you're the first person to get rejected from everywhere, from Oxford Academy.
Okay.
I was like, wow, I feel like such a big failure. And then that's when actually my sister randomly was like, hey, Riya, like, have you ever thought about art school? Never considered it until that moment. And I was like, I have nothing to lose. It's either I apply to art school or I go to community college and then transfer out, right? So I just like put together some like crazy hodgepodge portfolio of like random drawings and paintings I did from 7th grade till 12th grade, put it together and I just submitted it.
Why do you think you got rejected? Like, was it because of grades? What happened?
I have no idea. You know what's crazy? Like, so I don't know if you guys use the same language, but here at least, we'll say like apply to your safety schools that you know for sure you'll get in, and then like a reasonable school, and then your reach schools. Mm-hmm. So you apply to a range. I did that. I think I even got rejected from Cal State, but my grades were fine. Like, if anything, like, I remember at least senior year, I don't know. I don't remember my GPA, but it was good enough. My test scores were good enough. Like, I was like varsity captain of like volleyball. Like, I had all the extracurriculars down in terms of on paper. I shouldn't have been rejected from all of them. I should have gotten to at least one or two. So it was really weird. Yeah. To the point where I'm like, okay, there's some divine intervention happening. But like it just didn't make any sense. Right. So it kind of felt like I was like kind of like led into pursuing the arts.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It's
so like
weird.
at the moment that you were applying for colleges, that's when it was sort of decided for you that you were going to go down the art route.
Yeah.
Huh.
I wasn't even really bought into it. I was just like, okay, I guess I'm doing it. Like, I'm good at it, but I'm not like, I was not thinking about doing this.
Right.
Yeah.
It's interesting because, for me as well, it wasn't until I was applying and the one law school I applied to, I ended up getting accepted to. So I ended up going to dental school because, I got accepted. When I was accepted, I didn't even realize that I'd been accepted until like way later.
Oh, okay.
And then I told my parents. My parents asked me, well, do you even want to go? And I thought about it. And, even in that moment, I thought to myself, well, I'm doing a dual degree.
Yeah.
So if I, do study law and I study science and I decide I want to still pursue the science route, I can later on. But then the idea or the prospect of studying something like law that would almost sort of set me up to do whatever I wanted. I think that's when I kind of already knew that it wasn't just the one career that I wanted. Maybe it was there were other things out there that I wanted to explore. Yeah. So that's why I lean towards the legal sort of option, as opposed to sort of cementing myself into a career of medicine and,
Interesting.
yeah.
Wait, okay. So, because right now you do more creative work. So back then, were there no like inklings of it?
It's interesting because, when you were talking about your dad, and how he is an artist on the side, as a hobby. My parents, they were both very creative as well. My mum was a ballerina.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
She studied performing arts, and she also is amazing with instruments. She knows how to play like 5-6 different instruments.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she plays the drums, guitar, yeah, like all sorts. And she's great with her hands. She would always like make things, ceramic things at home as well. And Dad, you've heard him sing.
Yeah, he's a really good singer.
Yeah, Italian opera.
Yeah.
Right? So and he was an architect as well. So
he was?
Yeah, he
was.
was.
Oh, learning so much about aunt and uncle right now.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Yeah. So, obviously they've moved on from those careers, but they were quite creatively talented, and I didn't really think much about it growing up, but thinking back on it now, I think it makes sense that I'm sort of inclined that way as well.
Yeah.
At least in the sense of having multiple interests and pursuing a lot of different things in the way that my parents did. Even the way they moved to the States and then moved to Australia and then moved to New Zealand, they live somewhat of a nomadic life too. And I have as well. So I think that I'm actually mirroring my parents quite a fair bit. And I didn't even realize I was doing that. So I think in terms of creative inklings, it was there. I just maybe didn't realize it.
Yeah.
And another moment was, when I was in high school, and I also went to an academic high school as well. And the high school I went to, senior college in Auckland, was also situated right next to the Auckland City Library in the city. And sometimes during break times, I would go to the library and look at all of the interior design books and architecture books at the library. Yeah. And I knew that wasn't actually feeding into any of my academic, pursuits, but it was something that I was actually interested in. And I would, go online and go on like skyscraper forums and, look at different architectural projects that were happening around the city and different countries as well. And, clearly I had an interest in,
for sure,
in that sort of design architecture field. It's just, I never really took it seriously. I never allowed myself to think, oh, this is something that I actually want to develop my interest in. Had I sort of done that earlier, I guess the course of my life would have changed completely.
Yeah,
I wouldn't have pursued law.
For sure. Yeah, because I feel like growing up, I remember you being very what's it called? Like pulled towards very like beautiful things. Like you were really interested in fashion. I remember that. Yeah, I always remembered you being a very like you liked aesthetics a lot.
Yeah.
So for me, like when you made that shift to creative out of law, I wasn't surprised at all. Because I always saw it from like an outside of like, yeah, you were very much that type of person.
No, it's interesting you say that because my supervising partner at the firm, who subsequently became CEO, he used to say that to me as well. He used to say, oh, I can see you pursuing a career in fashion or like, design or something. And that was when I was still a lawyer. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know if he was sort of hinting at maybe, there's something else that you want to pursue. But here I am. I've sort of left that world behind. But it also goes to show, sort of going back to childhood, how, maybe then you don't pay that much attention to the things that interest you and like what you're drawn to.
Yeah.
Because you're so focused on what you ought to be doing, like your studies or like the things that you should be getting good grades in, that you don't even allow yourself to feel or like be drawn to what it is that you're truly being called to do. Like what where your passions actually lie. And in our school, speaking of design, I think I remember, in the basement of our building of the school, all the design students were there and they had all their studios there. And, I used to always remember thinking, oh, that's so cool. Because, it would be on the way to where all our lockers were. And I would always go past and think, oh, yeah, I mean, those are like the creative people. They're like, doing interesting things. And I was like one of the science people, doing the boring things up on like the third floor, So, and I always thought, oh, it's them, me, we're separate, we're different. No. But, I think had I leaned into that a bit more, or like maybe if, my environment, my parents or like someone encouraged me to actually pursue that a bit more, maybe things would have turned out differently.
Yeah. No, that would make sense. Yeah, like it's interesting that, you did take like a very different route, right? A very academic route. And like for me, it's like I still pursued a creative route, but kind of touching on that, it's like I never really felt like I was like an artist, or at least what culture portrays as an artist, like super passionate and, like always wanting to create stuff and, finding their identity in it. Like I was never that person. Like, I mean, maybe it's also my personality. I'm just so like chill. Like, yeah, it's cool. Art for me was always just a skill that I naturally had. So I never really had this like a passion behind it. It was just something that I could do. And I think that it was just something I operated in naturally, like creative problem solving. Like that was just like a very natural way to like look at things and look at the world, that I never thought it was actually special. So even going into art school, I didn't think like, wow, I'm living out my passion as an artist. It was like, okay, this makes sense. I'm about to pursue something that I am very good at, that I know I have a skill for. Because I knew I was different when like, I forgot who I was with. Maybe it was like my mom or something. We were looking at 2 black items. And I was like, those are 2 different blacks, Amma. She's like, what are you talking about? They're both black. I'm like, no, that one has more red and that one has more blue in it.
Wow.
She's like, how do you, how do you see that stuff?
An eye for it.
I was like, you can't see. Like, it's just so clear as day. So it was just like kind of like one of those things of like, oh, that's just like a matter of fact for me. That's just, I just see the world, I guess, in that way, in a different way. And so, yeah, it was definitely different for me of like, it never was like a passion at the core. At the end of the day, I would always say this, like my passion was really, it lied within like being able to connect with people. Like I love going deep with people. I love having like really rich conversations. I hate surface level conversations.
Sure.
Like I just want to go deep. Like that, I was always that way ever since I was young, and maybe even when I was young, I didn't have much tact for that. I just kind of like maybe just like went a little bit too deep too fast. But
real talk.
Yeah, but so I always had that in me as well. I knew like people was like my passion, like helping people or like, you know, being with people was something I enjoyed the most. And art was just like, I knew a skill set that I just was able to operate in at a higher level than most.
Right. That's interesting. I mean, I love people as well. Extrovert.
Yeah.
Love being around people.
You're an energizer bunny. I describe you that way to all my friends.
Yeah, I have been described as an energizer bunny a lot of times over the years. But yeah, no, I definitely like feed off like energy that people like offer, like, you know, just being around people. The real talk, I love the real talk as well. You know, in Australia we call it DNMs, like deep and meaningful.
DNMs.
And you know, I love having a DNM with someone, getting really deep. And yeah, sure, like you can do that with, you know, anyone really, if they're willing to get into that. But I'm also really good at surface level conversation too. So I think that's one thing that I've also, you know, maybe my corporate career sort of helped sort of develop that as well. But, you know, like surface level conversation, the small talk, you know, sort of, some people might say that it's too fake, pretentious, you know, whatever. But I also enjoy that, you know, like just, you know, you don't always have to dig deep. You can just skim the surface, and like, especially with someone who you know that you're not going to have a, you know, ongoing relationship with. Yeah, and you just get like a little moment with them, and you're like, you know, that was nice. But I think that, you know, I always knew that people, working with other people, doing things for people, that was all very, very important. But I think as in my younger years, I think people influenced how I operated a bit too much, maybe to the point where I started finding myself wanting to please other people, wanting to belong with other people. You know, I grew up in many different environments. You know, at one point in my life, I had only, you know, white friends. I had only, you know, Korean friends, you know, and then, you know, sometimes I had a mix of, you know, male and female friends, and, you know, my groups changed a lot. And I think that being in different environments, you learn to adjust and adapt yourself and bring out different personas. But I think at the core of it, I think I sort of lost who I was along the way at some point. And instead I started wanting to fit in a lot, you know.
Do you know when that happened? Was that like college years?
No, actually, I think it was even before that. Since when I was a lot younger, I think, you know, growing up as an immigrant kid, you realize that, you know, you don't necessarily sort of fit the mold, and you don't look like everyone else, and, you know, you try to belong to the tribe, the community, if you have one, and I didn't growing up in New Zealand, and I felt like, you know, I was constantly looking for that as well. Yeah,
that makes sense, right? As an immigrant kid, it's like you want to belong, you want to fit in, and I could see how that ends up, you know, taking precedence over your actual true desires of what you want to do as a kid, and what really matters to you, is because you're just so consumed about fitting in.
Exactly. And it took a while. But how about you? Like, I mean, it sounds like you had a very smooth trajectory through to, to your career. Was there sort of anything for you?
Yeah, like I said earlier, where like there's that aspect of like helping people and connecting with people that I just knew that that's where my heart came alive, even though I could do art well. So actually, like my my departure from my true self, I guess, I think I would say it happened more so later on after college. So like I mentioned before, after art school, like even during art school, I had this desire to like explore like helping people. Like I didn't know what form or what that would look like. I've always like thought about, oh, maybe I should get into psychology one day, I don't know, just the very very expected routes of like how to help people become a therapist or psychologist or it's like but I did have that desire. So right after I graduated from college, I actually took time to go volunteer, right? And I volunteered like with a lot of like humanitarian aid work, with refugee work. Actually, what should have been a 6-month stint ended up becoming 5 years of doing that.
Wow.
I fell in love with it. I came alive in it. And this is kind of, I mentioned like maybe a couple episodes back of like, that's when I felt the most alive, right? I mean, it's natural when you're helping people, you can't help but feel like you're living out in purpose, right? Because you see that live exchange happening. But I still have this skill set, right? Design skill set. And that's what was funding my volunteer work. I was self-funded. And so I was back in the day doing remote work. Like when it wasn't a popular thing, like I managed to find some remote work during those years. And then when COVID hit and thrusted me into that tech finance world, that's when I really felt like the departure happened. I felt like, oh, I I'm just trying to survive financially. I'm doing that through design. And I'm no longer part of that like volunteer world anymore. And I think that's where I really felt the breakdown happen. And it's not that I don't enjoy creative work. I love it. It just kind of is natural to me. And so to me, it's like kind of like the air I breathe. I'm constantly always thinking about aesthetics, design, proportions, color. But I've never like amounted it to being like my purpose, which I think is actually quite interesting because I think most people that maybe aren't artists would think if you are doing artistic type work, you're living out your purpose, because that's like,
Yeah.
in movies they portray that as like that's like a person truly living out what they really desire to do. Which to an extent, for fine artists, I would really say, yeah, I'm pretty sure that's the case. But I'm a designer. So like it's not as much of that. So I just viewed it more of as like a really good skill set that I enjoy, but it wasn't the thing that like brought me to life.
I mean, so what did bring you to life? I mean, I think you just mentioned volunteering and helping people. So is that to say that you found your purpose and then you left it? And is that something that you want to go back to? Or like, is that what you're actually seeking?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, that's what I'm trying to figure out now. Cause like, I don't actually necessarily want to go back to like just volunteer work. I think at this point in life, I've like garnered even more skill sets that are making me dream even bigger of like, at the creative agency I was at, like, I built the skill set of like how to really look for efficiencies for sustainability, for sustainable work culture, to have a healthy work culture. And I'm like, that's amazing, right? I'm like, oh, if I can build environments, spaces that are not only safe for people to feel in, but also feel efficient and feel released and empowered to like really like thrive in like their strong suits. I'm like, I kind of like that, right? And so I'm like, oh, how can I use these current skill sets that I've accumulated, like the business side too, and like translate that into more like a social good, social impact direction. Not necessarily like I want to create like a social impact, company, but it's like thinking more than just making money. Like if I'm going to build something now, like a business, it's like, it has to be more than that now. Like it can't just be just to make some money. It's like, to me, that would be another loss. It'd just be like, I need to connect it back to helping people bring like actual impact and change.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting because, you know, I think maybe for both of us, we both realized, or like, maybe not realized, but we just knew that money wasn't everything.
Yeah.
And money wasn't going to give us happiness. It wasn't fulfilling enough. It wasn't the answer to all our problems. It just was maybe just a means to an end. Maybe it was just part of the package. But it wasn't the thing that was going to keep us there, right? Yeah. And so, you know, in this next chapter that we're living in, we know that it's whatever we're pursuing, money can't be the goal. You know, that can't be it. Because the thing is, you know, once you get it, once we've both experienced receiving all of it, getting there and going, okay, so what's next? Yeah. What else is there?
Yeah.
So, you know, sure. I mean, obviously you need the money in order to survive, and you need it to, you know, fund and sustain. But these other things that we want to set as goals, you know, maybe it is that altruistic element that you add to whatever you're doing.
Yes,
and that is something, a segment of what you sort of set out to pursue.
For sure.
Or it could also even be, I mean, in my case, that creative element, needing that, you know, even if I don't do it personally, I'm not the one making or creating, to be in an environment where creativity is a subject matter that I'm dealing with, or the people that I'm working with are using their creativity. I think that was another element of what I knew that I needed in my career, in my day-to-day, to make everything worth it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. It's like, at least like for the design world, like it's not like I want to do a full departure either. I love it. I still want to be a part of it. But in at least the current constructs of that exist right now, like an agency, it's so limiting, at least for a person like me that wants to use design for like more impact. And it's like, how, right? And that's the questions that I've been asking. It's like, how do I merge the two together? Because there is space for it, right? It's just, I need to forge my own path in that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, we're going to be talking a bit more about, you know, how we've been doing that and what we've been up to, and how we've been able to take all of these past experiences and really bottle that up and turn it into something and apply it to our respective lives now. That's for another episode.
Yeah, I think that's the next one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah.
But I think hopefully some of what we've shared today about our childhoods, the different influences, you know, what sort of led to us going down the path of, you know, what we were doing before, has been useful, or like it provided some insight maybe to your own lives, about, you know, and got you questioning and reflecting on what you've been doing. And maybe this is maybe the impetus for change, or
yeah,
you know, questions.
right? Yeah, and I feel like the topics that we're touching on, like talking about, it's like we know like our friends, our family, like we know people asking the same questions, going through the same thing, and it's like, yeah, the fact that we get to just kind of like openly do that here and to share, it's like pretty cool. Yeah, and hopefully, yeah, exactly what you said. Hopefully it encourages some people.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, stay tuned.
Yes.
Join us for the next episode.
Yes.
Thanks for listening to us.
Yeah, see you next episode. Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.